Well, hello everybody. What we're looking at here is my industrial sewing machine. It is a Juki. The model number is DNU 1541s. I had some problems in that I was getting some jams, and the thread was coming up and it was shredding. So it would sort of sew, but you could tell something was wrong, and it was really kind of struggling when the wheel would turn and all that type of stuff. So I did end up going in and doing some stuff, and I'll show you some footage of that here in a second. When I put all this stuff back together, I actually thought that I had hit record, but I did not. So what we'll do is I'll bring you guys in a little bit closer, and I can sort of tell you what I did kind of after I show you the footage that I have of going in on the inside and kind of what the actual solution was. So what we have here is a bit of a close-up of how this thing looks when it's all back together. To take everything off is actually relatively simple. You have a screw right here, and that will let you take the needle off. And then you have another screw here, and then one here, and those let you take your presser feet off. To take the throat plate off, what you need to do, you've got two screws. You've got one here and one here. That will then allow you access to the feed dog, which is under here, and it has two screws as well. And once you get those things off, all this stuff kind of cleared away, you have a lot easier access to it. Okay, what we have is the throat plate has been removed. I also took off the feed dogs, and I took the needle out and also removed the walking feet off of here so we can see a little bit better. The crux of my problem, so I was getting shredded thread, I had gotten a jam, I tried to do the reset and it just didn't seem to work, and I was trying to figure out, well, what is going on? So I looked at a bunch of other videos, and what I noticed in the videos is what I just did here wasn't happening. So this, for lack of a better term, would be the bobbin basket. So your bobbin sits inside here. And what is supposed to happen is this little cutout here, this protrusion, so this whole assembly here will come forward, will go this way. And what it does is that protrusion keeps the basket from rotating. So if it moves at all, it moves just a small little bit. And you also have the thread from the bobbin and also the thread from your needle kind of comes down in through here, and it comes up through this area. And so I think sometimes that's the cause of some of the jams that people are getting, is that this thing maybe gets kind of pulled away. These motors are so powerful and there's so much torque with them that I think what happened in my case is there was some type of a jam, and the jam pulled this thing back a little, and it made it to where the bobbin basket moved off. And so then everything kind of, I could get like a couple little rotations and it would jam up. And then I think also what happened at the same time that this kind of got pulled back so that it went this way, some other thread came in and it pulled this assembly here kind of forward. Now this is all one thing. So I like I said, I think a couple of things happened, because what I was also getting is as the needle was coming down, it was getting deflection, or it was making contact with the hook here. So what I will need to do, let me put my finger here and I will rotate the wheel, and we'll be able to see the screws here. So you have a screw here, and that is what holds this assembly in place. And then if we rotate it a little bit more, I'm trying to keep this thing in alignment, and you have another screw here, right here, and that is what you will back off a little bit, and then that can allow you to come in with your screwdriver, and then you can kind of tap this whole thing forward a little bit to where your basket assembly, I guess, I don't know if that's the right term again, houses this protrusion in there, and that does not let your bobbin basket move. So let me bring you in just a little bit closer, and we can see all this stuff. You can see that protrusion a little bit better, and then you can see here the housing where that thing is supposed to go in. So I've rotated this part up a little, and what we'll do is we'll move this again to where it's as close to being centered as we can get. And then what I'll want to do is come in and kind of lightly tap on the back here. And I've also already loosened these screws a little bit. And what I did is I basically just kind of broke them. And then it gives you, you don't need to back them all the way off or anything. And then what you can do is you just come in and let's see if I can give this a little bit of a tap here. So we've got that part done. So now if I rotate the wheel, it won't allow that to move. That bobbin basket stays in place. And prior to that, because, I'll pull you out just a little bit. Prior to that, when that basket would rotate in there, when that housing rotates, it would jam up with the hooks a little bit. So when that hook comes around, and again, when we do the timing here in a second, because I'm going to have to retime it, because I did get some deflection on this. But I know that this particular thing is designed to have some movement in here, but you also have to have some space. This protrusion can't be right up against here because the thread's got to come through. So eventually what I'll have to do when I'm doing this stuff is I will have to make sure that the thread comes through. I'll have to make sure that the needle is coming through and it's at the right thing when it's timing. So right as the what did you call this? The needle bar, I guess, is coming down. As it comes down, and you see it's wanting to start to go back up. So if we rotate it, and now the bar is starting to come down again, and we're going to see that hook is going to start to come up. And as that, if the needle were here, what you would see is that needle is going to be just on this outside of that as that comes up. And so it's not going to touch it, but it's going to be a very short distance across. So anyway, that's what I think the problem is. If it turns out that I've gone a little bit too far this way and the thread is kind of getting caught up in here, I'll have to gently tap this thing back. I don't know what the exact clearance is here, but I also at the same time have to contend with the hook and the needle and making sure that as the hook comes up, that it's timed with the needle so that it can pull the thread out and you can have your lock stitch. What we're looking at here is a drawing of the needle, sort of like a close-up view. And then over here, we have a representation of kind of what's happening when we're trying to time it. And like I said earlier, I thought that I had pressed record, but I hadn't. So the orientation of the needle is important. So where the duck is, that's where, if we were sitting down facing the machine, the duck represents where your wheel would be, And then this way is where your needle bar and your presser foot and your all the business end of doing the sewing is. You have a cutout on the needle, which they call a scarf, and then right below the needle here is where your eye is. So if we were looking at it head on, it would kind of look like that. You'd have your cutout here in the eye. And then this represents the left side of your needle, and you have a long slot that's cut into the needle here. And your orientation is important, and that has to do with how the thread is picked up and how your bobbin is picked up. And that's why that cutout is here. The easiest way to remember the orientation of the needle is your long slot will always face left as you're sitting down at the machine. So the way that your bobbin case and then this little, I think they call it like a thread finger or something like that. I'm not exactly sure. When the needle comes down, it brings the thread, and as this rotates, the thread goes underneath this piece here, and as it's rotated, it's sort of brought around. Eventually what happens is the bobbin thread is picked up, it's brought kind of in through here, and that's why you have to have that space. And then it's kind of hooked, and then it's brought out through the top. So a real quick thing about this finger here is that sometimes if this is right up against where in my case, where the feed dog sits, if you bring your bobbin case and this stuff forward to where this protrusion here will catch, you may still get deflection of the hook with the needle. And when you bring this back this way, back to give yourself clearance so that that hook can come through here, then you don't have enough of the protrusion captured by the bobbin basket, and it will want to like kind of slip off. It may kind of work for a little bit, but if the needle kind of pushes it off, if it's right on the edge, then your basket is going to rotate again, and then that's when you're going to get kind of a jam. On the underneath part of this, there's like a little spring that holds this up as well. There's a couple of screws, and I think you can move this a little bit, and you wouldn't have to move it a lot. Remember, where the spaces look big here, but we're not really dealing with a whole lot of space and movement. They're very, very slight movement to get this stuff right. And again, this little kind of cutout here represents where the needle will kind of go down in, and that again allows that thread to be captured and brought under here. Another thing is that if, let's say you've got your throat plate off and your feed dogs off, and you're doing testing, you think you've got your spacing right where your timing looks like it works, but the thread isn't really doing anything. Sometimes it's going over here, maybe sometimes it goes there, but the bobbin thread isn't coming up. You have to manually, when that needle goes down, make sure that the thread goes in here if you don't have the throat plate on. When that throat plate is on, what it causes that thread to do is to go down into here, and then as this spins, the thread is basically kind of going through a whole bunch of stuff, and it kind of slips off here and pops in through here. It's actually quite a fascinating and ingenious design. But if you do have that throat plate off, it's not going to work, because that throat plate helps to guide and trap that thread and have it go in through here so that as it rotates, it'll work. All right, let's go ahead and I'll sew this little scrap piece of leather that I've got together. And then we'll kind of stop it here with the needle in. And then I'm going to do a reverse stitch now. What we've got here is about a 5mm stitch, and then we've got our back stitch here, and then underneath you can see the stitches here. So I think the tension on this would probably be fine. And this is at a pretty slow speed, but you can see it doesn't have any problem. And what we'll do is we'll just go one more stitch. Now we've got our needle down, we'll raise the presser foot up, and then we can kind of pivot the leather around. We'll come across and go back up. We're going to want to pivot, so we've got the needle down. We'll bring the presser foot up. We'll pivot the leather, and then we'll come back across. And this is on a relatively slow speed. I do have a speed reducer, and I also have a servo motor, so it can go pretty slow. So that speed that you just saw there, actually let's do one more stitch. There we go, that's good enough. And I can either use the knee lift or the lever on the back of the machine. But the speed that we're going at right now, that's with the pedal completely forward. So we're down, we'll go ahead and lift it up. And then we can go back nice and slow. And if I want to go really slow, so you can go very, very slow and make sure that you're getting done what you want to get done, and that you're not, so if we were trying to maybe go into a curve or something, and I'm actually speeding it up because it's a little easier to go like that. And then we can lift that so we get a little bit of a curve. We can again go forward and back. And then we can come back up. So with this machine, I am still learning, but you can see even a novice like me can do pretty much what I want to do as far as having a relatively good level of control. But I think you get just really nice uniform stitches all through here. I didn't do a back stitch here, but on that section is my back stitch there where we went backwards. And so you can see it'll lock them in, and then this is the underside. So this would be your bobbin thread, which in this particular thing is the same exact thread. It is a 138. All right, let's do a quick test here, and we'll do a little bit of a seam on some of the scrap leather that I have. So we'll hold on to our threads here. Now I guess I can do a little back stitch. 1, 2, that'll be fine. And then I'm not trying to be too particularly straight or anything. We're just seeing if it can do the stuff we want it to do. And then we'll do a little bit of a back stitch here. 1, 2. And let's see. right there. Come in here and... Sorry, I'm kind of fumbling around, but I am not used to working, number one, with this machine, and then I'm also not used to working with the camera. So, the iPhone and everything down so close. So we've got our stitches here, and then our back stitch, and then if we were to lay this thing out, let me see if I can move you out a bit. There we go. If we were to lay this thing out, we could come in and even sew a flat. So if we wanted to, we could come in and sew a seam here and on this seam, and then that would give us kind of that nice stitch. So let's give that a try. Let's see what happens if we do that. So now what we want to do is we're going to come in here and we're going to stitch this thing down. We'll grab our threads and we'll do a relatively close one. We'll put the presser foot somewhat close to there, and then we will give ourselves a stitch or two, and we'll go back, and let's see what we get. I think I might just barely be catching the edge here, so we'll just go back there. And then we'll kind of come up here, get our needle out. And we'll give us a clip here and here. Whoops. These things are not exactly the sharpest. We'll clip here. And here. Let's take a look at that and just sort of see what we have here and then here. So let's do this other side and just kind of see what it would look like. All right, we're gonna kind of try and go down here and see what we get. And I'm actually gonna start off kind of doing the first couple of stitches backwards, and then we'll go forward. So we'll do one. I think I bopped the camera there, sorry about that. And then we'll come down to about here, and then we'll go back. And then we'll bring our needle up, raise our presser foot. These industrial machines, I've heard about this, and you can't probably tell, but that bobbin thread kind of wants to stay in there a bit. Sorry for the fumbling, I'm trying to do this over the camera. But you sort of have to bring your wheel, you kind of have to rotate it a little bit, I think, to get that bobbin thread maybe to kind of come up and around. Otherwise, it wants to stay in there. I also don't know if I have my tension maybe set up a little too tight on that bobbin, because I'm getting some messes under here. So I think, I'm not sure what's causing that. So I'm gonna have to do some more experimentation and testing and all that type of stuff. But like I said, I am relatively new at all this stuff, but you can get a nice, get that up here. You can get sort of a nice, almost like an upholstered look like you would have maybe in a chair or something. And you would, of course, these things would be trimmed up a little bit neater, but it doesn't look too bad from the front, and then from the back is how that thing looks. Like I said, I'm not sure why I'm getting that. I'm sure this is user error, that little rat's nest there. So if you guys know what I'm doing wrong here, let me know. So for me, I think I have got the majority of the problem fixed mechanically, with being able to get the bobbin basket realigned and get the needle realigned where there's no deflection, where that hook is not hitting the needle. The rest of this stuff is pretty much just me needing to be more familiar with the machine and kind of learning and figuring out exactly, what my tension needs to be here, what my tension on the bobbin case needs to be, what needle works best with what thread, and all that type of stuff. So there will be more of these videos with this beast here to come in the future. And hopefully I'll be able to get a good skill set built up with this thing and get a good understanding of how it works. And when something goes wrong with it, I'll be able to understand, okay, this is what I need to do to fix it, or this is when it is sort of beyond me or beyond my capabilities and I need to maybe take it into somebody. If you guys have any questions about this, in my limited capacity, I will answer everything that I can to the best of my ability. Unfortunately, I'm sure a lot of the answers are going to be from me at this point is going to be, well, I'm not 100% sure. But I will try and answer everything that I can. I have not sewn fabric with this. The only thing I've sewn on here has been leather. And so I do have a little bit heavier canvas, and I am going to try some of that stuff, but I also have some different thread that I want to do. And so at a later date, I'll film some of that stuff as well for you guys, and we can kind of figure out what we're doing together. All right. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll talk to you later.